Yo, what is up guys? Delboy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that like, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. So, this weekend marks the return of Teofimo Lopez. He makes his debut at £140. He is fighting in Las Vegas, and his opponent will be unknown Mexican Pedro Campa. Now, Pedro Campa is a guy who's been fighting in relative obscurity, though he's managed to build a record of 34 wins, 1 defeat, 1 draw, 23 of his 34 wins coming by way of knockout. It's also worth noting that this fight isn't a 12-rounder, instead it's only a 10-rounder. Now, when this fight first got announced, I kind of wrote it off as your average comeback fight when a well-known fighter is coming off a loss. And that could very well be the case here, but I have had a little look at Pedro Campa, just to get an idea of what sort of fighter Pedro Campa is and what he brings to the table. And in looking at his footage, this could very well be a fighter in which is tailor-made for Teofimo Lopez, a fight in which is made to make Teofimo Lopez look good. Pedro Campa is very aggressive, extremely aggressive. He looks strong, he looks like he carries some sort of power, and he is quite a big super lightweight. He is very thick across the back. He's around 5'9", so he's a good sized 140 pounder. And listen, when it comes to Pedro Campa, his game is all out aggression. When it comes to his approach, he's certainly not subtle. It's not like he'll apply pressure behind the jab and he'll change levels, set traps on the front foot to counter. Nothing like that. It's basically wham bam, thank you ma'am. It's bull in the china shop, and he essentially uses his physicality, his fitness, and his strength to apply his pressure. Doesn't really do it behind boxing fundamentals. Let's just say it like that. And that sort of guy against a quick counterpuncher like Teofimo Lopez, that could easily be his undoing. He could get knocked out here in a couple of rounds. As I said, Pedro Campa doesn't jab his way in, doesn't really throw straight punches. He'll come forwards, he'll lead with his left hand, and he'll lead with a left hook. And when he gets his opponent stationary, he really likes to throw wide looping shots in combination. That is right and left hooks to the head and body. Occasionally, he'll come through the middle with an uppercut, a right uppercut, or he'll throw a short overhand right. But primarily, his game is to lead off with hooks and basically try to run you over. That's his style. He'll lean forwards as he's applying pressure. His head will basically be beyond his lead foot, or his lead knee, I should say. So he's open straight down the middle, and he comes in straight lines. There's no doubt about it. And like I said, against a quick-handed counterpuncher like Teofimo Lopez, there's every possibility that Teo could get rid of this guy in super quick fashion. There's no doubt about it, because Teo, out of that shoulder roll, he can utilise that pull counter right hand, time Pedro Campa coming in, and he could land a series of real hard shots. He could also counter with his left hook. He's quick enough to get to the target first, and Pedro Campa offers a lot of holes, defensive flaws, for Teo to take advantage of. So there's every possibility that Teo could get rid of this guy in a couple of rounds. However, as we know, Teofimo Lopez is coming off a loss. He lost to George Kambosos last November in a big upset. Teofimo Lopez was supposed to defeat George Kambosos relatively comfortably. Kambosos went in as a resounding underdog, but of course he pulled off the upset. That was a big shock to the boxing world, and it was a big shock to Teofimo Lopez. And after that fight, he made a whole host of excuses. He was saying some bizarre things on social media that the zone set him up. There was murmurings of, personal problems, mental health issues, things of that nature. For a short period, it seemed like Teofimo Lopez was going off the rails after that defeat to George Kambosos. And, despite the fact that Pedro Campa is very limited, he can't go into this sort of fight with that mindset, because one thing about Pedro Campa, if Teofimo Lopez isn't all there, and he's not fully committed, and he can't hurt Pedro Campa early on in this fight and get his respect, it could be a very tough fight just by virtue of the strength in which Campa brings to the table, the high work rate in which he brings to the table. That was one area in the Kambosos fight where Teo was found wanting. He got out-hustled in many rounds of that fight by Kambosos. His gas tank wasn't there, and we saw that in that Kambosos fight. Teo tried to blast this guy out of there early on, and he couldn't do it. As a result, his stamina basically third round onwards wasn't what it should be at the elite level of boxing. So he needs to be aware of that in this fight, because if he can't get rid of Pedro Campa early on and he expends a lot of energy trying to do so, then who knows, he could be in a bit of trouble here. When it comes to these unknown Mexican fighters, it's not always hard to tell what you have until they step up. We saw that with Mauricio Lara quite recently. He was unknown going into the Josh Warrington fight, and we saw what happened there. Maybe, who knows, maybe someone like Pedro Campa could be similar. He does have a similar style, sheer all-out aggression. He'll lead with hooks, he'll take risks, and he'll come to fight. And if Teo is still not really feeling it, he's not feeling himself, he's not confident, he's still got those demons in the back of his mind. If he has a bad start to this fight, he can't hurt Campa, and he takes some punishment, then this could be a bit of a banana skin for Teofimo Lopez. But at the same time, it's one of those fights where I could easily see him winning this fight easily early on by knockout because of how defensively flawed Pedro Campa is. Now, Pedro Campa, he has been knocked out once before in his career. That was back in 2017, and worryingly, it was against a guy called Carlos Jimenez, who was 11-8. He also drew a fight after that a couple of years later in 2019 to a guy called Abner Lopez. That was a 10-round draw. So, there's a couple of blemishes on Pedro Campa's record at a low level. But again, sometimes these sort of fighters coming from Latin America who are unknown, they can be kind of like diamonds in the rough, and they can pull off the upset. So, I don't know. It's one of those fights. I could see it being... I could see Teo having a bit more trouble than many are expecting here. But obviously, the sensible pick is Teofimo Lopez. I think stylistically, he's got all of the tools to counter Pedro Campa at will. It's just really how well Pedro Campa holds a shot and how good his chin is. If his chin is good, and that knockout early in his career was just like an anomaly, then I don't know, maybe Teo has a hard night, or a harder night than we would expect. But we'll see. That'll be interesting if Campa does have a good chin and he manages to extend Teo for a few rounds. It'll be interesting to see how Teo responds to that. But yeah, I think that is one question mark we have over Teo right now, is the mentality, the confidence, because again, after that Kambosos fight, he showed, he wasn't exactly showing positive signs that he was getting over the loss and learning from it. More so, he was making excuses and saying some rather bizarre things on social media. And even before that, when he had that hard fight with Masayoshi Nakatani, where he really struggled, again, even after that fight, he was getting in his feelings, making all sorts of excuses, and he won that fight. So I do sometimes question the mental makeup of Teofimo Lopez. To me, he comes across as a guy who is just from the outside looking in, he comes across as a guy who is very unsure of himself, kind of insecure, and maybe that is because of his relationship with Teo Senior. We see this a lot when it comes to fathers in boxing training sons. They can tend to get, sometimes they tend to get very overwhelming, and we see that play out in public. Maybe that's a factor with Teofimo Lopez, but we'll see how he looks in this fight. Again, it's a 10-rounder. Stylistically, Pedro Campa's he's going to give Teo a lot of opportunities to land some big shots. Really, it's down to the sort of fight this is down to how tough Pedro Campa is and how well he can take a shot, and also how well Teo's power transitions to 140 pounds. But I am somewhat interested to see how Teo looks in this fight. What about you guys? I mean, listen, it's one of those ones. I could see it going. I think Teo's going to win regardless, but I wouldn't be surprised if Teo wins early on and looks dominant. But at the same time, you know, I wouldn't be shocked if he has a harder time than we're expecting, just based on Campa's style, if he is durable, you know? But yeah, share your thoughts below. Beanie Guy Delboy, peace.